cat a log. That's a little better.
Hi there. About a year ago, I set out to start learning how to use this Apple II Plus that I had recently acquired, and I was doing it only with original documentation that I had my hands on, and well, this is not quite as useful as I'd hoped. That was the wrong manual. I needed something more like this, it turns out, to know how to use Apple DOS 3.3 on here. Since that video, I have spent a bit more time learning how to use this machine, but also spent more time just getting to know the ecosystem around it and becoming more familiar with how to use it in general. And I've been acquiring some new peripherals. So today, we're going to go over a couple of new things that I now know how to do with the Apple II, as well as installing and using a Super Serial card, which is something I am particularly excited about because that also means, oh boy, I can set up and use my Apple ImageWriter printer with the machine that it was made for, which I'm very excited about because I've just had this thing where a computer doesn't feel complete until it can print. This is like the final Turing test of a full desktop setup in my eyes. So having that really just is the cherry on top of this thing. But there's also one more thing we're going to take a look at because we're going to need to print. And why not use the print shop? Except that I bought this at Goodwill and it didn't come with the disc. So I need to know how to make a disc. But thankfully, over the last year, it's gotten a lot easier to make a disc without needing a newer Mac. And we're going to explore how to do that.
Now, I know manuals aren't the most exciting thing ever, but there aren't a lot of opportunities left for me to have the real intended experience for something, or at least accurate experience for something like the Apple II, a very historically significant computer that I just have no previous experience with. So I'm trying to soak this up as much as I can. So finding more correct manuals and documentation like this is making this experience so much better for me. So I am really happy to go and maybe make some mistakes, but also just learn in this way. Although I am starting to loosen my rules slightly because this manual is good and I'm very happy to have it. This was sent to me as part of the Apple IIc stuff from Michael, but I have been referring to this version of the Apple DOS manual a little more because this one seems to be much better written. As you get into the actual document here, the way that it lays out the information is a lot easier to digest when you're just starting out. Now, this is still an actual Apple manual. I just think that it's from a slightly later series of documents. So, for example, this one here is from 1981 copyright date. This is much more closely related to this one and is from 1982. So I don't know quite exactly what's different. The only other point I have to reference is that Super Serial card. I have the manual for that. This came in the box. This is also from 1981. So it seems like between 81 and maybe 82, possibly with the launch of the 2E or something. Well, I mean, this says for 2E only, so it could be the 2E manuals were rewritten compared to the Plus and the older models. And when they did that, I think they spent a lot more time on it because these make a lot more sense. So I have been reading some PDFs. I want to try and get the paper copies of some of these, and I have ordered a paper copy manual specifically for the ImageWriter because while I do have the manual for that here, you'll find that this is part 1 reference, and apparently part 2, I think it's user's guide or something like that, has not been scanned anywhere, and I was able to order that, so I will be scanning that when I get it in, because, again, it's really nice to have this stuff, so trying to do what I can where, but I've been really enjoying reading through this and learning more about the system. Now, I have been going through this because it is nice to see things like, catalog here. I did have this absolutely screamed at me in the comments of the last video I did, but this was also a good reminder to see this here. But I have been learning some new things about how to use Machine thanks to this document, and at least one of them here I would like to show you before we move on to installing that Super Serial card, because I thought it was a pretty cool option. Now, there's one thing in particular that is really difficult about Apple IIs, and that is the disks, and making copies and backups of them. Commercial software would have all sorts of tricky ways that they would encode the disks that would be difficult to copy. And this is down to the drives themselves being directly controlled by the CPU. Now, I somewhat misspoke in the last video about this when I said that the drives have integrated electronics, and what I meant was that they didn't rely on the standard Shugart interface drive or anything else. It came from the hardware manufacturer. They have an Apple custom board inside that is unique to these, but the drives themselves are controlled by the CPU, and it's just kind of a weird setup. So I slightly misrepresented what I meant to say there, but the Apple II drives are a whole other ball game compared to almost anything else, because they're just very, very strange. Now, what this means is that copying some disks can be difficult, and there are two things that I find interesting about it that the original DOS manual covers here. The first one, copying the system master disk. Now, I find it really hilarious that they want you to immediately copy your original operating system disk here, just in case something happens to it. This isn't like, oh, piracy, copy the floppy. This is just good practice. Now, the whole process here for copying a disk like this is multiple pages long, but I found this to be far more interesting, preparing a blank disk with the init command, because this also copies the main operating system to the disk, but it also gives you an auto-exec type thing as well. Let me demonstrate this. So I'm going to write a quick program that is a print statement here, and let's do something fun. We'll call this TT-DOS. So all this is going to do is print TT-DOS. You know what? Let's do TT-DOS ready. There we go. So we're going to save that there, so we're going to enter that. Then we're just going to do end. That's it. That's our whole program. We run that. Boom. TT-DOS ready. So there we have a program in memory. Now I'm going to take a blank, fresh disk here. I'm going to pop out the original system disk, and I'm going to put this one in. All I'm going to do is run the init command now, but I'm also going to save the current RAM program as hello. So the drive buzzed there because it knocked the head against track 0 to know where it's at. And what this program is doing is it is writing everything that is loaded into system memory for the loaded kernel to the disk, along with the program that I had written, and we're writing this program as the hello program on the disk. This makes this disk bootable, which I think is ridiculously cool. Now, I'll demonstrate another thing here. Control reset just resets the currently loaded software. We will do PR Octothorpe 6 to initialize from the disk drive, which will load the fresh disk that I just made. And we see TT-DOS ready. Now, the interesting thing here is if I turn the system off and then back on, it will boot that disk and then just present it as TT-DOS ready, not telling you that it is loaded Apple Basic at all. And we can do all the normal things like you would need to be able to do with DOS 3.3 here. So I just think this is absolutely hilarious. I really like the ability to create the auto-exec program here with hello. I think that's absolutely fantastic. So yeah, I've been having a lot of fun with the operating system, but I would like to keep having fun with some hardware. So we're going to install the Apple II Super Serial card here so that we can use the image writer with the Apple II. This is an intended configuration, which is just so much fun. Now, this is not a brand new example. It is in the box, but it is unfortunately not complete. So you'll see that this is for the 2 Plus and the 2E, and this is fairly important, actually. Inside, we would get the manual here, the registration card, page thing. So Apple owner, Apple dealer, there's our serial number, I suppose, for this. There's our limited warranty. And then we have our packing list, which is interesting because of this page that I'll flip over in a moment. But here we have the Apple II Super serial card. I did put it in this bag, so it's a little more protected. But that's it right there. Now, the Apple II is unique amongst the three computers from 1977 because if you pop this up, you have the ability to add cards to the machine, which is absolutely fantastic. So my machine has the disk controller here and the language card here, which bumps it up to 64K of memory and adds the ability to directly boot off of the floppy drive without having to enter PR6 from the initial BASIC. So we're going to add the Super serial card here, but I do need to know how, which is where the manual comes into play, but you'll notice something here. This box is empty, and that's not exactly a serial port on there. And this is what this page talks about, because this should have come with a bracket that you install to have a serial port poke out of the back of the computer. So it'd be a DB25 connector. But in particular for the Plus, you should have this box clamp shell that holds it on. You'll notice on the back of the 2 Plus here that we just have slots in the back of the case. The disk drive cables, for example, are just kind of pushed through there. The 2E later added D-shell ports to the back that you can just put connectors directly in and mount them to the case. This one doesn't have that, so if you don't have that box clamp, you just have to poke the shell out loose through the back, and then it kind of just dangles around, which is not ideal. Now, I didn't get the box shell or cable with this. I just have the card. However, I did buy an Apple III recently. From that, I removed a profile hard drive card and this Super serial card. So I now have 2 of these here, and this one came with the 2E style D-shell breakout cable to have serial on here. So I can at least use this. Although, that's not the only option, because if we go to the back of the manual here, which, by the way, this manual and these documents are kind of ridiculous because, well, here's the firmware running on this chip. Just, you know, there's the assembly. I want to get a little bit farther back here. There we go. If the firmware wasn't good enough, there's the schematic of how to build the card. But also, 1 page over, connector pin assignments. This tells you how this cable is wired up, which means I can just make my own. So I made a 9-pin version that I can use with these cards as well. So I can just plug this in here. I have the Sharpie mark on there to tell me what the key is. And there's that. Now, you might also notice that these are female shells, which is slightly weird because serial is supposed to be the male pin variant of the DB shell, but Apple IIs just kind of expect that, so the cables and stuff are that way. It's weird. Don't worry about it. But yeah, so that's how I'm going to handle that. But we're going to go ahead and put this card in, which is the one that came with the box with this cable, I guess, in here. Because I actually have an original Apple RS-232 DB25 cable here, so I want to use this with it because I think that would be really fun. So all we have to do is just pop it in there, right? Not quite. We should definitely read the manual because one thing you should know is that PR6 command that I think I demonstrated here to load a disk is referring to the slot that that card is in. So we need to know what slot should we put this in, because it's most likely that software will want to be able to access the card through a particular slot. So we should read the manual, which, you know, oh shucks darn, I'm so disappointed in. But I'll spare you the details because I have read through the manual, and there's how you put the box shell in. I'm so jealous of that thing. Oh, that would be really cool to have. But anyway, we're going to put this into slot 1 here. You'll note that it is starting at slot 0 where the language card is. So we're going to go just to the right of the language card. But also, you need to go through and set up the dip switches on this, which is what this area is talking about. Now, the dip switches control baud rate and parity and some other settings, like whether or not a carriage return character is added. Those are mostly defaults that are what the card will use if it is not software configured, which it also can be. So here are commands for how to set the baud rate as a software defined option. So that's possible too, which is good because it means that different programs can change settings if they need to. And that is something that we'll get to in another video, but this is very important. But I will say there is one gotcha in this that I did not catch, despite having looked through the manual somewhat, because I kind of just glossed over this page, preparing the Super Serial card for printer mode. There is a very weird feature that this card has that I've never seen any other serial interface have. And I have already pre-configured these two to be different for it. And I'll give you a hint. It doesn't have anything to do with the switches over here. What it is this chip-looking part that's actually a jumper block. Now, if we look at this chip-looking thing, you'll see there's a triangle on it that either points towards modem or terminal. And what this does is, I believe, just swap the RX and TX lines that essentially null modems the hardware card itself. This lost me so much time because I did not catch that, and I wouldn't have ever thought that this would have existed. Now, this is the wrong setup. We actually want this to be pointed towards terminal for the printer, so I'm going to go ahead and yoink this chip and then flip it around to configure this correctly for the printer. I actually find this kind of particularly interesting because both of the cards I have here were already set to modem, which could mean that the users of the Apple IIs, well, 2 and 2.3 most likely, that these came from, were using them with BBSs, which would be cool. Or it just means that they always use a null modem cable with it, because I have tested, if this is backwards, yeah, you can just stick a null modem adapter in there and it works just fine. It's just super weird that that's built in there like that. I have no idea why on earth Apple did that. But now that the card is all configured, we can install it in slot 1 here. We could put this in any other slot. That would absolutely work. And later on, I'll be putting the other one in slot 2, actually. But this is the default slot where most software would expect this to be. So without configuration, this is how we would want it to work. I'll also mention that I have pre-configured the dip switches to 9600 baud 8N1, the most common standard for serial stuff nowadays. That's how I have the image writer configured as well. So this just ends up working out pretty well for that. Now, as I'm buttoning this up here, it occurs to me that while that teaches you how to configure the card itself, it's actually worth looking at the printer too, because unlike probably most printers you've ever seen, this is not parallel, it is serial, which means it also has baud rate and other control settings. So this thing needs to be configured as well. Now, I've already used this printer a lot, so much so that I ended up writing my own documentation for how to configure it on the inside of the lid here. And this talks about the switches that are down here underneath this little plastic thing that are right there, all the way down in there. Now, this front block here configures the baud rate, and that configures other kinds of settings that we don't really need to get into, but that's why I have that all right there, because, yeah, you have to set that to configure how the printer actually communicates with the host system. It's kind of weird. I've never had to do that on any other printer, except for this one. Eventually, probably the other HP ThinkJet that serial will need that, but for now, this is the only one I've had to do that with. Having it properly configured now, though, means I can plug in that original Apple II serial cable to the printer and the computer. Now, before we fire up the computer with this printer, I want to take a minor detour and talk about one feature of this thing that I haven't ever talked about, because this is part of why this is possibly my favorite dot matrix printer I own. And it's kind of dumb. It's not the best or most usable printer that I own because it uses a cartridge ribbon here. I have other printers use typewriter spools. It makes them a lot more usable in the long run. But this is a feature that no other dot matrix printer I have can replicate. So to load continuous feed tractor paper into a printer is usually an ordeal. But this one has a feature that some other printers must have, but I don't have any that do. You just press it into the tractors here. It can catch it. Look at that! It just self-fed. It's ridiculous. The path for the paper is so good on the image writer. It can just do that. And also, it has a flat knob, so when it overfeeds the paper, I can just bring it back exactly where it needs. It's the perfect printer. I love this thing. Okay, that's everything all set up and connected using the Super Serial Card here. So, what I'm going to do is turn on the printer. We see the select light here comes on. The select light disables the local control. If I press it again, I can do a line feed there, bring it back. That puts it into computer controlled ready mode. And now we're going to go ahead and boot our TT DOS disk here. And as the computer itself turned on, the printer rehomed. We have TT DOS booted here. And now we're ready to control the printer. We can do this directly from BASIC, although it's easiest to do this with a program because, well, it's kind of weird. Let me just show you. Now, this is a concept I'm becoming more and more familiar with as I use these late 70s and early 80s computers. But what we're going to do is we're going to tell the computer to start outputting everything to PR1. And by default, that's just what accessing PR1 is going to do here. I assume there is a ROM built into the Super Serial Card here that tells it like, hey, this is what I'm going to do when you do this. But then we can print whatever we want. So let's say 20 print. This is printed on an Apple image writer from an Apple II. All right, so that'll be our print statement. Then what we have to do is go back to the internal display using PR0, which is the language card. So I'm not 100% sure exactly how this works, but this does work. And that will make our program return access and printouts directly to the monitor, which it would not do elsewise. So now if we do 40 end here, it will return and exit back to the DOS prompt on the monitor. So to print from the Apple II, from BASIC, all I have to do now is run that program. Of course. What did I do wrong? Okay, kind of back to where I was. Remember how I said I had it set to 9600 baud? Well, I didn't. I had 3 on switch block 1 here up when it should have been down, and that changed the baud rate. Now it is set to 9600 baud. So if I type run here, now we get our printout. Now, if we ignore the grammatic mistake that says from instead of on here, we can see that we did print on the image writer, but we also got that character. That's the command line character here. And the really cool thing is if we change out this command, let's say this is what catalog looks like on this disk. All right, let's put catalog in line 20 instead, because we can print anything to the printer as long as we set PR1 first. Now if we run the program, syntax error, catalog. Huh, okay, apparently we're not allowed to do that. I guess it does some funky stuff when you try and put catalog in a BASIC program. I don't know what is up with that formatting. I obviously didn't put it in that way. That may be why it's not working. I'm not sure, but we demonstrated that we can print from BASIC, so I'm satisfied. Having the printer working and being able to print from BASIC is good enough to make me happy. Because being able to do this means that we are set up well enough to be able to try the print shop. But like I mentioned, first we're going to need to make a disk, because this was incomplete. It does not have the actual floppy disk in there. It does still have the colored paper, but yeah, it does not have the floppy. So let's go look at what it takes to make an Apple II floppy disk now, again, without using a Mac.
Here we are on a Linux computer, and I have two disk images I want to work with, AppleDOS 3.3 and the Print Shop. We're going to look at these two files for particular reasons, but before we do this, I would just like to point out that my video on using the Apple II for the first time came out on April 29th, 2023. That's significant because both the Greaseweasel and the Flux engine had commits for Apple II support after that. Specifically, the Flux engine here started undergoing some rewrites of the Apple II stuff right after that video came out. And it wasn't until this year in May that the Apple II even started getting implemented in the Greaseweasel. So when I did this video, there was no chance I was ever going to be able to use an Apple II disk with any of the tools that I already had. The applesauce has been the de facto way of doing Apple II stuff in the past, but the software for that is only for Mac, which I would really like to avoid. So I've been hoping that the Flux engine or Greaseweasel software would step up to the plate, and they very much have now. Let's start out by running the Flux engine GUI, and then we're going to open that AppleDOS 3.3 disk image. With this, we can click Browse Files at the bottom after setting it to AppleDOS and a 140K image. In there, we can see the files in the disk image. If we really wanted to, we could even extract these files. So I can save the hello program, and I refresh this, boom, there it is. I can open this with a text editor and see the tokenized BASIC with a few strings mixed in. Now the cool thing about being able to read and write this stuff here is that the Flux engine software can also use the Greaseweasel hardware. So I'm going to relaunch the program after turning on a floppy drive and connecting my Greaseweasel. We can now see we have the Greaseweasel hardware available. If I put my original AppleDOS 3.3 disk in the drive here, we can browse the real disk through the Greaseweasel. To make this even more clear, if I put in the TTDOS disk I just made, there's the hello file. I can save that, open it with the text editor, and there it is, the TTDOS ready prompt. We just pulled an individual file off of a real Apple II disk from Linux, which is just ridiculously awesome. But we can go in the other direction as well. I don't actually need this disk, so we're going to write a disk image to it. Let's select the Print Shop DSK file, and we're now writing an Apple II disk from Linux using the Greaseweasel through the Flux engine GUI software. Now again, I'm pretty sure this can be done with the Greaseweasel alone because its software has added the new Apple II support as well. So it should be possible to use that as well, but it's cool to see it at work here with the Flux engine GUI. And there we go. I believe that is all 35 tracks of Apple II goodness written. As an aside, the Print Shop is especially weird. If we browse the disk now, the catalog is a credits for the program itself instead of just the program files you would expect. And a few fun facts about the Apple II file system: you can have spaces in the name, you can have special characters, and file names can be 30 characters long, much more advanced than its contemporaries.
All right, now back over here in real hardware land, we can complete my actual copy of the Print Shop with a fake disk here by popping it in the Apple II, and now I can turn it on and boot it. Yeah! Oh, that's so awesome to be able to make disks that way. That's so nice. Now there is one problem here, and it's that monitor. That thing is monochrome, and that's no good when it comes to the Print Shop. So we're going to take advantage of a feature that makes my Apple II slightly unique here, and I'm going to go grab another display. Now, what kind of monitor could I be grabbing? Well, the Super Serial Card box art here shows exactly the kind, because it's an old television. My Apple II came fitted with an RF modulator that allows it to send NTSC video to a television in addition to the composite monitor that I currently have sitting on top of it. And that means I can get color. Now, unfortunately, there's no way I can turn the monitor brightness down on the TV, and it is way brighter than everything else in here, so this is going to be a little bit difficult to film. But you can see color over there, which we can't see here. Now, the Apple II is unique in supporting color here because neither the Commodore PET with its internal monochrome monitor or the TRS-80 Model 1 that is just straight up monochrome are able to do color in 1977. So this computer is really good, and for some reason, the Print Shop is able to extremely well show this off. what in the Jeff Minter were they thinking when they created the print shop? This is just ridiculously cool. And especially when you consider when this computer was made, this is so good. If you're curious, here's the color monitor, and here's the monochrome one. Monochrome one's way sharper, and that's why you would use the composite output, which I'm pretty sure can do colors. It's this CRT is monochrome. But man, just whoa, look at that. That's insane. All right, now we didn't get the print shop going here to take a trip because we're about to bring everything together here. We installed the serial card so we can interface with the printer. And we have the printer working now, which means we can use the print shop. And we had to make a disk so that we could actually run the software. So let's bring this full circle now and print something. We could actually print the kaleidoscope image, but because this is monochrome, and I don't know if it could ever do color. I think the ImageWriter 2 could do color. I only have a monochrome ribbon here, so no matter what, it's not going to be color. But it might be possible to do color if I can get a ribbon like that. But for right now, let's go ahead and make something here. Let's say a sign. All right. So we want to print this out. I'm going to go ahead and do a form feed on the printer so it knows it's at the beginning of a page. So let's go ahead and make a poster here. So thin line, no. Double line, get better. Thick line, don't want to waste that much ribbon. Beads, ooh. Lattice, oh, I'm feeling lattice so far. Stars, though, ooh, man, stars. Oh, wicker's not bad. From other disk. No, I don't want to try and figure out how to load another thing. Let's go with stars. I kind of like stars. Okay, choose a graphic by picture. So we're going to load pictures here. Oh my gosh. Oh, that's ridiculous. Okay. Wow. Oh, and their color kind of over here. Yeah, if I could adjust the brightness of the monitor, that would be great because it's way too bright. It might be that the TV thing is outputting too strong of a signal. I've tried to tune it, but it doesn't help as much. It's actually something about the color burst alignment. There's a little potentiometer on the board. But yeah, it doesn't help with the intensity, just the color alignment. And I was able to tune that as best I could. But let's see. What do we want? Oh my gosh, you know what? It is actually October. Let's make a Halloween sign. All right. All right. Select graphic size. Small, medium, large. I mean, obviously large. Okay. Let's see. Choose a font. I mean, oh man, these are stencils pretty good. I'm feeling stencil. Okay, now type your message. Okay. All right, there we go. The most delightful Halloween message. Okay, so I think we're done. Do we press escape when we're done here? Okay, escape. Oh wait, escape just goes up a line. Oh, okay. Control I. Press any key to continue. Okay. Are we just done? Now typing your message. Okay, do I just go all the way to the bottom? Okay. Center text to top, bottom. Sure. Okay. Sign print. All right, here we go. Okay. Actually, I should probably show you the setup process here. So you go into the setup menu. Then we pick our printer type, which is Apple ImageWriter. We have a super serial card. It is in slot 1. I don't know why it asks how many disk drives we have, but we'll say 2. Okay. All that looks good. Okay, we're going to press enter to test the printer. All right. It kind of printed, so I think we're good. All right. All right, back to this. We're going to do 1 copy here. Okay, for the position, I don't think we need to test that. Now I'm just going to hit print. Let's watch it print. And there we are. I will say I would not have added the extra text if I had known it was going to be put over the image. But man, that 3D effect is pretty good.
Well, I think that sums up where I'm at with my current adventures in Apple II. I have the Super Serial Card installed, I can print, and finally have a reason to use the TV out that was built into it. And we can make discs without a Mac. Really excited about that. Turned out this video's audio has also been moderately cursed. This lapel mic was not being recorded for most of the time for 2 reasons, it turned out. So I don't know what I'm going to do for audio on this one, but I'm sure it's not going to have been amazing, so my apologies. But that is going to be it for today. I am in a very good place with the Apple II now. I'm really excited to have reached this state. I can do pretty much everything I want with this thing now. That's so good. Which means it'll actually be coming up in a future project just as a normal computer that happens to be usable with something that I'm working on, which is really cool that it's just ready to go now. So I am very excited about that. But that's going to be it for today. So if you want to see that video when it comes up, you might want to subscribe because it should be pretty soon. If you want to help support the channel, you can find me on Patreon. But for now, that's it, and I will see you next time.